Street is.
Real good.
Okay, are we all set? Yes, we're live. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the March 7th, 2024 meeting of the Lower Downtown Design Review Commission. I'm calling the meeting to order today at 8:31. Let's go ahead and get started with commission introductions. Craig
Lawrence, owner operator.
Andy Duckenham, preservation architect.
Fred Glick, property owner in the district.
I'm Heather Vasquez Johnson, practicing architect and chair.
Tom Sullivan, a contractor.
John McIntyre at large.
Jim Gravener, resident of the district.
Right, first item on the agenda this morning is the meeting record for approval on January 4th, 2024. Anybody have any comments or changes for staff?
Move approval.
That's it.
All right, seeing none, I think meeting records can be approved. As we get started, moving on design review items, up on the screen for anybody joining us virtually are audio tips for those virtual participants. Adding a background noise suppression, testing your speaker and microphone. If you are presenting or you are a public commenter when it's your turn to speak, for muting and unmuting, please click the microphone icon on the bottom of the screen. And if you are having challenges with audio, please switch to phone. All right, first thing on today is the consent agenda. We have one item on the consent agenda, which is item 2024-COA-036 at 1516 Wazee Street for a projecting sign. Does any member of the commission wish to pull that off of the consent agenda and move to design review? I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads, so would someone care to make a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thanks, Fred.
Can you state the item number?
Oh, you need the whole thing. Okay.
Someone has to state. Either Heather or you.
I'll bring it up.
I did announce it, but I could say it
Oh,
again.
did you?
I did, yeah.
Well, then we're good. Okay.
I actually got it right here.
You want me to read the whole thing?
Since you have
Sure.
it, yeah.
I move to approve application 2024-COA-036 for the projecting sign at 1516 Wazee Street as per design policy standards and guidelines, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Fred. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Thanks, Andy. If you are on the call for sorry, thank you. We missed one meeting. I'm out of practice. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any nays? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thanks for the reminder. If you're joining us virtually for consent agenda, congratulations, your item has passed, and you can move about your day. So we will move into design review. The process for design review is up on the screen for anybody joining virtually. I'll announce the design review. We have one item on the agenda today. If any commission members have a conflict of interest, they will let everyone know and exit the room. We will have an introduction of the application and a recommendation from staff, at which time the commissioners can ask questions of staff. The applicant has an opportunity to give a presentation for 10 minutes, after which the commissioners may question the applicant. We will open it up to public comment. So if there's anyone joining who would like to speak on it publicly, you'll have 2 minutes. And if you are here, please click the hand raise button so staff knows that you're here and will allow you to speak. We'll follow up with staff clarifications, open up commission deliberation, and then make a motion and vote. So with that being said, we will move on with item 2020-COA-023, 1420 Wine Coop, phase 2 design details, and turn it over to Jesse.
Just a quick note that Westfield is a current client that might have a conflict of interest relative to this project.
Thanks, John.
So this is 1420 Wine Coop Street. It is currently a vacant lot, bordered on the west by Wine Coop Street, on the east by Wazee Street, on the south by Cherry Creek, and on the north by 1430 Wine Coop, which is a contributing building to the district. This application was approved for phase 1 mass form and context on September 5th, 2019. I don't know why I'm getting into the 1990s. And it was reviewed and approved for phase 2 design details on February 6, 2020. And it was also again approved with revisions on November 2nd, 2023. The applicant was denied on October 5th and approved again, like I said, on November 2nd with those revisions. And now the applicant is coming back today with additional revisions to the packet. Staff is recommending conditional approval of this application, citing design guidelines 5.2.1, 5.3.2, 5.3.3, 4.8, and 4.26. I will go over our reasoning for that recommendation in the next few slides, and we'll cover in depth those proposed details. So we'll start with the floor plans and then move into the elevations. So the first change that will be happening will be to the garage level, which is subterranean. They will be simplifying what is currently, I would deem it, an L-shaped footprint, and they're just making it a simple square footprint now, a rectangular footprint. And that new footprint will be 88 feet by 266 feet. So the application proposes 6 alterations to the first and second floor plans. The first of these changes, the applicant is proposing to eliminate the mezzanine level between the first and second floor, reducing the number of levels from 9 to 8. The second is that the proposal shows the first floor entrance highlighted with that red box to the left of the screen on both of these examples. They're moving it north roughly 13. Third, the applicant is proposing to add 3 patio areas highlighted by the blue box at the bottom of each of the images on the south side of the building under the arcade area. These patios vary in footprint and configuration. And then finally, the fourth, fourth, the applicant is proposing to reduce the depth of that arcade on the south side of the building, and that's highlighted with the green arrow. And they're reducing that to 6 feet in depth. And that will be consistently the full length of that arcade. Fifth, the applicant will be proposing to alter the ramp configuration on the east side of the building, as indicated by the yellow arrows. And the new ramps will run along the east and south sides of the building, and they will be 6 feet in width. And then finally, the applicant is proposing to eliminate the garage doors on the east elevation, and they're going to change those into swing arm gates, as indicated by that orange box at the top of the screen. The applicant is proposing to add several partially recessed balcony and projecting balconies to the exterior of the building. All of the proposed balconies exceed the allowable balcony size outlined by guideline 5.3.3. Staff is recommending the condition that the balconies meet the 10-foot width and 5-foot depth preference under guideline 5.3.3 for all balconies on this building. So on this slide, staff is highlighting the addition of fully recessed balconies to the south, east, and north sides of the building at levels 2 through 4, as indicated by the blue boxes. In general, staff are supportive of the use of these recessed balconies on the building, but did have some concerns about the recessed balconies on levels 2 through 4 on the East Boise Street facing elevation. And that is highlighted with that green arrow on the right side of the screen. Staff did want to point out that the commission has previously approved recessed balconies below 55 feet, specifically on this building in the past and on 1800 Market Street, which is why staff wasn't especially concerned other than with the depth, as we felt that it kind of visually interrupted the door and window articulation on the street side of the building. So that being said, staff feel that the overall size of the balcony, especially the depth, visually interrupts that door and window articulation on this facade, and steps should be taken to reduce the balcony size. Staff also felt that a reduction in the balcony size on this elevation could significantly alter the opening articulation, and a better option might be to place the recessed balconies on the north elevation rather than on the south, or excuse me, than on the east elevation. So in addition to the recessed balconies, the applicant is proposing to add projecting balconies on the west elevation and southwest corner of the building at levels 2 through 6, as indicated by the orange box. And that's in the lower left-hand side of the screen there. These balconies on the southwest corner will be 12 feet 6 inches by 6 feet and will be set back from the front wall of the building 8 feet 10 inches. Staff are supportive of the projecting balconies on this elevation as they are set back from that front facade of the building. However, they do need to meet that size preference of no more than 10 feet in width and 5 feet in depth per 5.3. Continuing on with our review of the balconies on this building, the applicant is proposing fully recessed balconies on levels 5 through 7 on the north side of the building, as indicated by the blue boxes. The applicant is proposing partially recessed balconies for the east, south, and south elevations at levels 5 through 7, as indicated by the red boxes. In the previous approval, the applicant proposed projecting balconies on levels 7 through 8, as indicated by the purple arrows. And in the revised plan set, the applicant is proposing to reduce the number of and increase the size of those balconies. Staff is fine with the proposed balconies, but again, the size is the issue here, and we'd like to see it meet that guideline preference. So moving on to the upper story patio alterations, the applicant is proposing to expand the patio on level 5, as indicated by the green arrows. The previously approved proposal, the previous approval proposed partial depth. The previous approval proposed partial depth between 9 feet 8 inches and 10 feet 2 inches on their patios on the northeast, southeast, and south side of the building. The new proposal expands the patios the full depth of the roof on the southeast corner of the building. And then finally, the applicant is proposing 4 changes to the 8th floor or the 8th level of the building. The first proposal is that the applicant is going to add or alter the location of the stair and elevator on the north side of the building, as indicated by the blue boxes. The stairs and elevator will be set back 19 feet 9 inches from the front wall and will extend out 9 feet 2 inches to the north side of the building. Second, the stairwell on the east level or east side of level 8 will be shifted back from the south wall 15 feet, as indicated by the orange boxes. And then third, the applicant is proposing to add a safety railing to the south west side of the building at the pole area, as indicated by the green lines. And that safety glass will be 7 feet 6 inches in height from the rooftop, with 4 feet of the safety railing below the parapet wall. And then fourth, the applicant is proposing to increase the depth of the canopy on the west side of the on the west side of this level. as indicated by the purple boxes. The canopy will be 11 feet 6 inches in depth and will be set back 15 feet 6 inches from the front wall of the building. So now we're going to move into elevations. We'll start first with the south Cherry Creek side elevation of the building. The applicant is proposing 8 changes to this elevation, and I'll go through those really quickly. First, the applicant will be removing the mezzanine level of the building, reducing it from 9 levels to 8 levels, and that was previously approved in 2020, and that is indicated by the green boxes. Second, level one will feature recessed entrances, patios at the entrances to the first floor units highlighted by the yellow arrows. These units will be recessed 6 feet under the building's arcade, and the arcade will have a glass guardrail, which is also indicated in the drawings. Third, the applicant is removing the brake metal transom at the first floor windows under the arcade and on the glass building gasket as indicated by the purple arrows. And then fourth, the applicant is proposing to add fully recessed balconies on levels 2 through 4 on the southeast corner of this elevation, and partially recessed balconies on levels 5 through 7. On the southeast corner of the building as indicated by those blue boxes. The balconies will have glass railings, which matches what was previously approved. Fifth, the window openings on the southeast corner of the south elevation, levels 5 through 7 will have brake metal surrounds as highlighted by the orange bracket. And then sixth, the applicant will be removing the Juliet balconies on the southwest corner of the south elevation, and that's to accommodate those new projecting balconies on the west elevation at levels 2 through 6. And then finally, the applicant will be adding that glass safety railing. Here you can see that glass safety railing at level 8, and this is for a pool area, and it's proposing to extend that canopy out 11 feet 6 inches on the roof of level 8 as indicated by the green arrows. So now we're going to move on to the east elevation, and this has 5 alterations to this elevation. First is at level 1, and that will be the new ramp configuration that we talked about in that footprint. These ramps will run perpendicular and parallel to Wazee Street, and those are highlighted with the green boxes on the screen. Second, the applicant will be removing the garage roll-up doors at level 1 as indicated by the yellow arrows, and they will be putting in those swinging arm gates as I previously talked about. Third, the applicant is proposing to add recessed balconies to level 2 through 4 on the northeast corner and on the east elevation, and partially recessed balconies will be added to levels 5 through 7 on the northeast corner of the east elevation as indicated by the blue boxes. So staff wanted to once again express concerns over the depth of these balconies, especially at levels 2 through 5. Staff are recommending that the balconies not exceed that 10-foot width and 5-foot depth. And then the change in balcony size, especially on levels 2 through 4, may impact that opening articulation. And the recessed balconies may be better on that north elevation. Just wanted to underscore that again. Fourth, the fourth alteration, the window and door opening on levels 5 through 7 will feature brake metal surrounds highlighted by the orange brackets. And then finally, the floor plans at level 2 through 7, which you can see here on to the left of the current proposal, show a new window opening that runs from levels 2 through 7, but those are not shown on the east elevation. It should at least show up on levels 5 through 7 of that east elevation. So staff is recommending a second condition that the application or the applicant correct the east elevations to show those new windows on the east wall of the northwest bump out. He has decided not to move. All right. So now we'll move on to the west elevation. This is a wine coop street facing primary elevation of the building. They are proposing 5 alterations from the previous approval to this elevation. The first of which is at the main entrance to the building. On level 1, they'll be shifting that to the north as indicated by that green box. Second, the applicant is requesting to install projecting balconies to levels 2 through 6 on the southwest corner of the west elevation as shown by the blue boxes on the screen. The balconies will be set back 8 feet 10 inches and will have glass railings. Third, the applicant is proposing to alter the window configuration on the northwest corner of the west elevation from individual casement windows to mullion windows and a door unit as indicated by the yellow boxes on the screen. The proposed doors on this portion of the building will have slider operation. Slider windows and doors do not meet landmark guidelines, general guidelines 4.8 and 4.26. So staff is recommending the condition that sliding doors and windows be revised into doors and windows. Fourth, the applicant has adjusted the location of the stair and elevator on the northwest corner of the west elevation as indicated by the purple arrows at the top. And then the stair and elevator will be set back 19 feet 9 inches from the front wall of level 8 and extend out 9 feet 2 inches to the north side of the building. And then finally on this elevation, the applicant is proposing to expand the windows and doors and add a glass safety railing to the 8th level of the west elevation as indicated by the green arrows. And then we'll close this out with the north elevation. The north elevation will have 3 alterations from the previous approval, the first of which the applicant is proposing to alter the operation of doors on levels 2 through 7 on the northwest corner of the building, the doors on the northeast corner of the building, and the doors at the alley gasket as indicated by those yellow boxes on the screen. The operation will change from casement doors and windows to fixed side light with slider doors. Slider doors on the north elevation do not meet LDDRC guidelines 5.2.1, 5.3.2, or landmark general design guidelines 4.8 and 4.26. So staff is recommending that the condition that sliding doors and windows be revised in swing or casement doors and windows. The second alteration on this elevation is that the applicant will be adding recessed balconies on levels 2 through 7 as highlighted by the blue boxes. And then finally on this elevation, the applicant proposes to remove the approved Juliet balconies at levels 5 through 7 on the northeast and levels 2 through 7 on the northwest side of the north elevation as highlighted by that orange bracket on the screen. So pictured here are renderings of the proposed building, and the application materials have additional, drawings and renderings for your review if you need that. Landmark staff is recommending conditional approval of the proposal for the following reasons. The slider doors do not reflect window and door operation types found in surrounding historic context. The floor plan shows new windows on the east elevation of the northwest bump out, but the east elevation does not show those windows, and that needs to be corrected. And we're citing guidelines 5.2.1, 5.3.2, 4.8, and 4.26. The proposed balconies do not meet the size preference and are too wide and deep, creating visual interruptions to the building's elevations. And we're referencing guideline 5.3.3. And those requested conditions are that the sliding doors and windows be revised to in-swing or casement doors and windows, that the applicant corrects the east elevation to show the new window on the west wall, or excuse me, east wall of the northwest bump out, and that the balconies not exceed 10 feet in length and 5 feet in depth.
Thank you, Jesse. Any commissioners have questions for staff?
Quick question. The arcade, can you remind us, is the arcade, what the public access circumstances are with regard to the arcade? Is it right of way? Is there an easement? Is it private?
I'm not sure on that. That would be a good question for the applicant.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the property lines are on that.
Right, thank you.
It's private. Yeah, I'm just looking at this rendering. And that would have probably been covered under phase 1 mass form and context.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you, Jesse. All right. Applicant?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Invite you to come up.
See if I can.
As always, if you can start with name and address.
Absolutely. Hi, good morning. My name is.
1 second.
Sure.
Sorry, not quite ready. And then just let me know when you want me to change the slides for you. And because this is infill development, you do have a full 15.
Oh, really? I don't think I need an extra 5 minutes, but good morning. My name is Nate Jenkins. I'm with Oz. I'm a principal at Oz Architecture. Our address is 3003 Larimer Street. I can probably say I've been the design lead on this project since we first started working on it in 2015. And obviously it's taken a fair amount of iterations to get to the point that you're now seeing before you. We presented this to you. I presented this personally to you November 2nd. And we're appreciative of the unanimous approval of it as the design details at that time. That was the first version of this project that had entertained a full residential building. Since November 2nd, we've intentionally analyzed how this building becomes Denver's next luxurious condominium project. And that has prompted a number of different factors. It's the inhabitability and livability of the units, which we are still very much working on. Please know this, there's some cart before the horse here where we're designing the exterior and the design details before we're often programming the units. And so where we are today is really a moment in time to evaluate larger scale units that have usable and inhabitable outdoor space associated and attributable to almost all units to the highest degree that we can. I wish, and I have regret not having the first level as a part of this slide presentation, but Fred, in the way that I could, it is a publicly accessible easement and right of way, a stipulation that former project coordinator Stephen Oliver at the time had prompted in the interest of connecting Wazee through to the south streets to our west. And hopefully what you've seen is a far more less convoluted very outcome of this. There's a ramp that ties directly to Wazee. There's no scissoring. And then that's a small stair that makes up the grade differential between the arcade, which slowly rises, which is a unique outcome or a unique instance for evolution of the arcade relative to what you saw even November 2nd. So we slowly pick up grade right where the inference of the alley is depicted, and we make the turn along the canal and then slowly pick up grade along that way to make the disparate elevation between Wazee and Wynkoop, which is about 4 feet, slightly less. We are also leveraging that grade to create these private stoops. Before we had very slim alcoves, and thank you for pulling this up, by the way, that we felt were places to gather for the public and not really places to inhabit for the users. I think one of the missions that we've tried to achieve here is creating large livable flats. The townhome units that you saw November 2nd were very compact and compressed and forced a lot of compromise and use in terms of the usability of the unit. And so we thought that by so slightly lowering the height of the arcade, limiting the width of the public easement, and grabbing some of that area for the buffer between the public and the private interface made a lot of sense. So that's what you've seen evolved here. We're also now projecting, by making this shift, we're able to change the geometry of the parking grade below, which allows for this planted strip between the historic Cherry Creek wall and our building foundation, which we're really excited about. And that's why it looks so lush and private. Please do know that we are entertaining a 6-foot pathway through there for public use. Could please move on. I guess we'll kind of click through some of these slides quickly. Really floor by floor, all we've done is shifted the cores. The prior submission did not indicate the stairs where stairs occurred. I apologize for that, but the stairs and the elevator count are the same as they were before. They've simply shifted to also free up space in the parking garage. Everything now is quite stackable. And for the architects in the room, they'll know that the efficiencies of that are valuable before we're trying to translate or apply residential units to what were previously office floor plans. And now we believe we do have very livable units with many of these insertions that we're proposing. There are indicated in blue dashed lines, areas where we do have Juliets. There are 4 instances where we are entertaining sliding doors. It's not without consideration about the operation of those relative to our context. We have tried to limit those to non-street facing elevations. In the instance of the where we have our fire truck turnaround and the recess between the historic 1430 and 1420 building, we are 51 feet back with that slider door. In the instance to our north, we are effectively at the alley, representing the alley gasket, where we're, you know, one of the stipulations within the guidelines is that alley face could be viewed in a different light. And then the other instance, probably the most controversial of the instances, is at that northwest corner. You could see a casement door there or a swing door in would have an impact to the livability of the unit, but obviously that's why we've done it. It's not without sensitivity, and we're here to hear your feedback on those matters today. If you could please advance the slide. I think we're just going to click through these floor plans as we go. The terrace, I'm sorry, on level 5 there, the larger terrace, what we wanted to do, we obviously, this is thousands of square feet for what are 2 incredible units, arguably some of the better units in Denver, if and when this does get built. And what we're hoping for is a magnificent outdoor patio space that is lush and vibrant, but we wanted to reclaim the area that was not shown prior. For that, it obviously will not be 100% pavers as it's designed, will evolve, but we show it as this so that we could evaluate what we can do with that space, make sure that we're above book with the intent of that outdoor space. You can also see in that long linear unit, if I might point out, how a series of smaller balconies, what that might do, and maybe it's better applied on the next slide where we have on level 6 where it's floating. If we have a series of balconies that sit within the set window pattern, the chassis, if you will, that all of our design iterations have been applied to, we look at length at how and entertain how usable balconies in bedrooms and secondary bedrooms and off of kitchens that would look, which is why what you see before you has been presented, aggregating that space in a more functional and practical way that is away off of building face in both the south and the east faces made a lot more sense to us. And we hope that you see the logic. It's rather than having 3 or 4 vacant balconies year round, it presents an opportunity for balconies that will be used and are practically populated throughout the year. Could keep coming on the slides, appreciate it. Let's see where we'll go. On the rooftop, if you would. Yeah, sorry, here. We are entertaining a pool, and obviously there are complexities with that with respect to ADA and access. There's a small elevated deck that gets us to this top surface of the pool and a ramp down that then carries around from the north at the high point an elevated state, 3.5 with a guardrail, as Jesse has astutely noted, that sits 3.5 feet above our parapet that we're hoping is clear glass. We've detailed it as such. Then there's a ramp down that circulates along the edge, pushing the pole somewhat inboard of the edge. And then there's an intermediate landing deck to the south of that. And then we make up the grade to get into the community room just to the east of that intermediate level. And then what we're thinking, what we're proposing is a significant penthouse unit noted as item number 2. We don't typically plan these. These will come in time from a unit planning perspective, but we have obviously an incredible amount of outdoor space for that to be planned. Good, please. Elevationally, we have shown all of the balconies and the related depths from left to right, the protruding balconies that are connected to the glass form that has long been about a part of our conceptual design and design details. We feel is congruent with and compatible with the adjacent surfaces and facades, and honors the brick as it allows the brick to return to the building. And that transition, we believe, is healthy. There's still a metal transom at the lower level there, and the inference there being that there's sort of a building A and a building B that is connected by this alley gaskets in the middle. And then you'll see the flats that are sort of lower slung, less glassy and not interrupted by a heavy horizontal before you. And the re-entry balconies that sit at below the 55-foot datum there, where we once had Juliet's, those are simply recessed a little bit deeper. Above that, you see the pattern of the windows relative to where we're placing the larger, wider balcony. And hopefully you can imagine what it would have looked like with a series of smaller balconies and the usability of those. If you could please go to the next elevation. Realizing I'm using a lot more time than I thought. One of the big moves here is the any balcony, for lack of a better term, above the parking garage entry. This parking garage entry, even since Jen and I first started talking about this project, has been a bit of a trouble point relative to the overall composition. It's obviously services as a function, but we saw this any balcony almost as a scalable device that makes the transition from a large vacuous opening to a more dense patterned window masonry base. And then you see how it continues on up. On the west elevation, you'll see where we are proposing those slider doors in the gasket that's now much further, 51 feet back from this facade. And then the slight tweak of flipping the entry to the north is really a derivative of how we make the space most usable at the ground level. And so we've just simply mirrored that. And we believe it actually helps the composition in a great way. If you could please go to the next slide. I want to spend a lot of time on the north side, but you'll see we're trying to adhere to imply the 55-foot datum as we had been told to, and then the windows that appear on the eastmost side of this elevation still remain. We have reassembled a bit of the vertical stacking of where these go, and the composition between field and punched openings is largely similar with the introduction of some any balconies adjacent to the alley. If you could please. You'll see the glass guardrail at the top. It's a bit exaggerated here, frankly, but we have a guardrail at the top that we wanted to be honest about and get the temperament of the commission on what how that might feel in your eyes. You can see just with how far back that gasket is between 1430 and 1420, and now you can see here where the entry really does make a lot of sense where we've located it. As well as, sorry, the protruding balconies there on the glass, how those really bleed seamlessly into the facade. Thank you. If you could. Here's an aerial. We've actually brought in a drone photo to enhance this view. I think one of the things that this brings to light really is the both new and old context. Understanding that the context that we need to associate with is within 300 feet of our building. I think it goes without saying that there have been new buildings built with balconies that are across the street from us that are larger and wider and deeper than what the preferences do state. And we're not trying to defend or deny that those are our preferences. We have what we believe we've adhered to a lot of the preferences that are stated, but I think one of the things that we're trying to evaluate as we do contemplate a for sale product here is limiting the balconies to the size of what's effectively a large dinner table. It seems incongruent with the vitality of the neighborhood. It's Denver's most architecturally beautiful neighborhood, there's no doubt, and a harmonious neighborhood with visual interest, wonderfully crafted details, permanent materials, even with the occasional follies, does not come from firm enforcement of preferences in our eyes. And we're thinking that, you know, there are moments of opportunity here where we're concerned that by widening or narrowing balconies, it would force some recomposition of the things that have gotten us to this point from a mass form and context perspective, where window proportion and ratios, a distribution of side lights and mullions and styles of doors is all congruent, has been proven to be congruent with the context. And so it's not to defend or deny that those are preferences, but for contemplation on behalf of the commission, we'd ask that maybe the opportunity for folly is still there. Some of the most memorable buildings of the modern era do facilitate larger, more expansive and deeper balconies. So without further ado, thank you.
Thank you. Almost the full 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Do any commissioners have questions for the applicant this morning?
Absolutely.
One is there a way that the creek and what's going to be done down there can be incorporated into the building a little bit better? Because right now, all you've got is a blank wall that goes for a long block. And secondly, related one, which is probably a yes or no answer, I assume that the fire department's request for the turnaround radius ample sufficiency has been met.
Yes, sir.
That's not an issue anymore.
It isn't, but that is what's in fact informed the device, the architectural device between the 1430 and our new building is that's actually a hammerhead turnaround for fire trucks. So in terms of the creek wall, there are a number of things being contemplated for the terminus of the bridge and the future developments planned to our south. But the creek wall that is east of the alley and where we have our kink is actually a historic wall that cannot be touched. So believe it or not. And so that's one of the many factors that we've had to consider as we've evaluated the subterranean parking and where our building actually sits.
Have they shown any willingness to look at something other than a blank wall?
They have not.
Okay, that's, sorry.
It's okay, yeah. Everything, just for everybody's understanding, everything west of that sort of knuckle, that turn where the ramp begins, will be replaced by us. So.
And I guess there is a third question too, and that is, have you looked at anything that might adjust or might be an adjustment to allow the work that the Crockies are doing with the connection across Manny's Bridge, and et cetera, to be incorporated in here?
We have actively involved ourselves with
that's
ASC and the architects and the landscape architects. We're, obviously we're a peer group now, and we're all very familiar with how to work with each other. We're sharing backgrounds and trying to accommodate all of those things.
And we'll see how that comes out.
It's going to be Denver's most memorable moment. That's what I can say. So that corner has prompted.
Well, there's all kinds of things that have to be considered down there, and I'm sure you're fully aware of those. Okay.
Just to clarify, you are proposing condos, not
That's correct.
Condo quality rental.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sale, people with proven for sale background.
Any other questions for the applicant?
There are two more slides, but I've If I pass my time, sorry. If you go to the following one, it does highlight those windows that are on the return, the east face of that holdout. Highlight that, and it does show the any balcony that sits above the parking entry. We should have jumped to that. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak? If you are on the call and would like to speak, please raise your hand on Zoom so staff knows that you like to chime in.
You can also press *9, and if you're having any issues, you can email landmark@denvergov.org, and we will definitely get you moved over. Just checking the inbox right now, just to make sure. Okay, it's last time, not this meeting, but it doesn't look like we have.
Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll close the public comment and move into commissioner deliberations. What does everybody think?
I'll jump in. There's going to be some more technical conversations that the architects among us are going to raise with the windows and such. I'm confident. But I do want to express some concern about the adjustments to the arcade. You know, it now shows 6 foot clear. So while the renderings show tables and such there, that isn't going to happen because then you won't have ADA clearance. It's gone from creating what I thought in the earlier version was potentially some interesting public space moments along the creek to being something much more akin to what we see along Waterside Lofts, which I think is pretty pedestrian. I mean, it's pedestrian connection. It's not a place you feel safe lingering or want to linger. And while I understand trying to add the stoops, the porches out front, I worry a little bit about how effective those are going to be. The height isn't tremendous there. I think they're going to be pretty dark. I think that reducing the walk path to 6 feet clear, reducing the amount of it that extended out beyond the edge of the building where there are now plantings, I think it's going to make it feel like a fairly dark, fairly uncomfortable space. And I also foresee the planting areas being a real trash collector. You know, they're on the other side of a glass rail. The access isn't going to be easy. Management's going to try and pick that up, but it just feels like it's taken what was really kind of a nice moment along the creek and compromised it a great deal.
Putting my owner-operator hat on, taking my architect hat off, you know, I appreciate the move to for sale condos and then the resulting need for larger outdoor usable space. In keeping with, you know, the mayor's recent articulation of the central neighborhood district versus central business district, moves like this, I think, are worth entertaining to help encourage sellability and the vibrancy of the area. Taking that hat off, putting architect hat back on. I do question a little bit the scale of those balconies. Does feel a little overwrought. I don't think it's in keeping with necessarily the immediate context of the surrounding buildings. So while I appreciate the need for them, and I'm particularly looking at the ones that wrap the northern wing, their scale just does not seem to fit with the context. So I struggle with wholeheartedly endorsing a deviation from the preference because of that scale. But I think that maybe there's a midway point between the preferences and what's currently shown.
can jump in.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, I think that arcades is sort of it's an interesting challenge, right? Because I do think the idea of having a comfortable relationship between the recessed arcade and units and front doors requires some sort of like transitional zone. I kind of agree that it's kind of a tough, deep, like porch condition for the tenant, like off that unit. I wonder if there's the ability also to like push out a little bit into that planted area between the columns to establish a little bit of depth that could take tables, chairs, you know, something that lets you sort of push out into the light a little bit in there and maybe not quite have so much, you know, have some sort of balance of landscape and hardscape within those projections to kind of civilize that piece. I personally don't have any issue with the larger balconies. I would also commend condo development in lower downtown. I think the idea of committing to having ownership in the downtown is critical. And I think that comes with different expectations, particularly around large units that may even have families in them that need some outdoor space. I do think that where those balconies are locked up with the form of the building, particularly, that makes more sense to keep them aligned to the massing than it does to have them as smaller elements set within the massing. So I think there's some places where it just makes more formal sense to align to the mass. And then the larger recessed ones, we would do, if wherever we can, larger than 10 by 5s on market rate residential anywhere else, because we don't think 5 foot is enough to put a table out and inhabit it successfully. So I think that I know that standard exists and that is what it is, but I do think that the larger balconies here make sense. The one place where it does, particularly at the upper floors, the one place where maybe it does trouble me a little bit is that recess on the lower mass above the parking, where I think that there is a little bit of erosion going on there in terms of the form. And I guess one fix would be to say that those stack of 3 units don't have the same balcony condition. Maybe there's a winter garden type approach that would let glass exist within the masonry frame and kind of like hold the form of the building and have a indoor outdoor space behind it. Maybe there's some sort of like hybrid that could work in that moment, but that being just a big void does feel a little bit like it's eroding the kind of strength of that mass to me at the lower floors. At the upper levels where it breaks free, I think the larger balconies are making more sense. I'm a little bit personally agnostic. I don't know how strong we are, to be honest, about like sliders versus pivot doors. I mean, I don't have a strong opinion on that.
I want to like thinking about sliders versus doors. When I think about precedent,
yeah,
a little bit because they haven't been approved in this district before and previously, and that's not. I mean, that's a standard in the guidelines. So, you know, along with anything, if we're going to deviate from the guidelines, then we really need to be clear about why it's appropriate. And I think that there's a difference between deviating from a requirement versus a preference on that as well. So I'm flipping back through. I think that doors are a requirement, but I'm trying to double check.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think sliding doors are one of those things where they exist in the cheapest units and they exist in the most expensive units.
Yeah.
Like very nice sliding door systems exist in very nice units, and very cheap sliding door systems exist in, you know, they're the most affordable version of a door. So there's I agree that's a standard.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah,
discussion.
Yeah. You know, that one I would want to make sure we had a really good reason for deviating from the guidelines on that. And even with the balconies, although they're a preference and they're not a requirement, I think that through our discussion and our testimony, if we agree that it's okay to deviate from that preference, we need to be very clear about why we think it's appropriate here. Andy.
I think my comment's going to be a stick in the mud for all my contemporaries here, in that I think we need to focus on the purview of this commission is the historic aspect. And I'm trying to put my blinders on. I don't care about market rate. I don't care about home ownership. I don't care about condos. How does this building fit into the context of lower downtown? Therefore, starting with the arcade, my interpretation of arcades are always for large public buildings. They're meant as a grand space to go through. This part of downtown, these are really passageways. They're not meant to be formalistic. They're not meant to be occupied. They're meant to get point A to point B. So to me, the way this has changed is really dealer's choice. I don't really, it's not my opinion to say it's going to be a dark, cold space. I don't care about maintenance. Does it fit with the context? And to me, it does. It goes from point A to point B. Done. In terms of the balconies, I think it gets a little trickier because, again, we're in historic context. The limits are 5 foot by what, 12 foot? 10 foot. So I think we need to hold to that as much as we can because that's the standard set for the district. However, I do agree that there are moments, for instance, on, I think it's the west facade, where the length, it makes more sense to have the larger balcony because it fits with the overall mass of the building. And I think making them smaller would pull your eye more to it than allowing it to disappear. However, where we can, for instance, on the south side and on the west side, where they're really more of an amenity, it makes sense to hold to the standard of being 5 foot by 10 foot. And then the sliders, I agree. I think there is no precedence for sliders in the district. I really think we need to go back to make sure that they're casement windows and doors.
I do think that the sizing of the balconies is an interesting question. Because I think we have to be concerned as we look at new buildings and infill coming into this district with vibrancy. I think that's pretty important. And I tend to agree with John's point. I mean, I tend to think that small, never used balconies detract from the district a great deal. And exploring with larger balconies create that vibrancy. I think that's actually worthy of consideration. And I'm recalling that this is a guideline as opposed to this is a preference, right? As opposed to a hard and fast. So I tend to think that I do have to say that I agree about the lower story pieces on Wazee. There's something very jarring about them. And just because the entrance to the parking lot next door is jarring doesn't mean that we should kind of continue with that. So I tend to align with John on that. And I do think that part of our remit is the public realm along the buildings. And I think that's important. And I think as it is now, it's concerning. It's not creating a vibrant public realm. And I think that frankly will affect the vibrancy of those lower level units. If that passageway doesn't feel nice, they're going to be a harder sell. They're not going to use the stoops. I think if we create vibrant public space there, it's much more likely to be reflected in the building and in how that works. Thanks.
To Andy's point, though, especially pertaining to the arcade, we're going to, we can make friendly recommendations, but if we were going to make a change or a condition or a requirement, we need a guideline to back it up. And I don't know. There's nothing there that says that what they have proposed is against the veterans. So
I don't have an issue with it being an arcade. I think it's just trying to find the best version of it. And I think the best version of from an urban design and public standpoint will also be the best version of it from a tenant standpoint or owner standpoint.
Right. My point is, as part of this discussion, is I think that the width of that arcade becomes a friendly recommendation and things for the applicant to look at, but there's nothing in a guideline that we can lean on that says that this arcade needs to be 10 feet or whatever.
And it's going to end up being a discussion with Dottie, I'm sure, about walk path width, etc., and what is acceptable in the neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. So Yeah.
I think it is worth noting too that there's some variation here in terms of what we're talking about with regards to balconies, because I do think that the balconies on the south elevation, although slightly deeper at 7'3", are only a couple of feet deeper, and they're 10 feet wide, so they're very close to a standard. I mean, the reality is in a 7'3" balcony with a parapet conditioned against the edge of it, you really only have a tiny amount of usable space behind that in a recess condition. So I think that those balconies are, in my mind, less of a discussion point. So if we have, some of those are even 5'10" by 9'1", so even like closer to the standard. So they feel, in my mind, close enough. Then we have the ones that are locked up with the building mass, which are the projecting ones, maybe on the end of the glass volume, which I think feel comfortable and logical relative to that. At the upper stories, we have attached balconies that are of a larger scale. I personally feel able to support that based on the type of unit, the type of use, but they are definitely larger. But we're talking about the idea of combining versus singular. And then there's the ones recessed into the mass, which I think are the ones that I have the most issue with.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think kind of the creek-facing ones that are recessed in are pretty close. We had some that were approved on the prior submittal that they're in the same realm of close to that. I think the questions are, do we feel like the projecting one facing the west is an appropriate size? I think it's the one over the parking garage entry is at an appropriate size, and I think it's the larger projecting ones on the upper mass that are a question.
This building doesn't really have a secondary facade, does it?
No, I mean, I think we could argue that the north facade and the interior lot line is the back, but because things around it are so much lower, you do see a fair bit of it from a lot of different vantage points. So I agree, it doesn't really have a non-primary.
Yeah, I think my concern with the balconies, it's always about setting precedent, but when I was looking at this the last couple of days, I've kind of talked myself into the recessed balconies aren't as concerning because they're recessed, and can you really, from the ground level, can you tell the difference between 5 feet, 7 foot? I mean, you're looking at shadow lines, everything else. It's like, and I agree, it's like, I'm dancing away from the historic piece here for a second. A deeper balcony seems to make more sense, especially when you're getting to furniture layout. The west balconies, I convinced myself the other day that those seem to merit the bigger balcony because of the way that it's integral to the mass. The only one that I had a little bit of issue with, that's why I was hoping someone would say, oh yeah, it's a secondary facade, is the one on the south elevation that's 22 feet long. That one is the biggest one that I can't rationalize. It's the only one unless someone can convince me that it's a secondary facade.
Yeah, well, that's the one that I struggle with the most.
Yeah.
That one and the ones.
The upper ones?
The upper ones, and then the ones at the red bubble part.
Yeah, those are the ones I was feeling are just a little over scale.
Yeah.
And again, getting away from the historic piece of the guidelines, those are the ones with the aha views.
Mm-hmm.
To me, those are the ones that make sense to be the biggest ones. But I'm trying to make it work from the historic set piece.
Yeah, I think, it's obviously not a secondary facade. It's a primary facade, but I do think that the type of units and do need that type of exterior space. The idea of providing it in smaller, kind of like broken down amounts is obviously possible, but feels a lot less practical and elegant to me. It does feel like the same logic applies and that it needs to lock up with the facade grid, but maybe there's a slightly different place where it can do that in order to reduce its scale slightly. But I do think that, small 5 foot by 10 foot balconies up on that level are not useful to that type of unit at all.
Is there a strict definition, maybe this is a question for staff, in the guidelines about primary and secondary facades? Is it like the street facing? I mean, is there a strict definition in there?
So in Denver, it's usually the facade with the primary entrance. Sometimes it's defined by zoning and what buildings front onto the most of the street. And a lot of times historic facades don't align with the zoning definition. So I don't know if that's helpful. Here in this district, I think the primary facades would be Wazee and Wine Coop, if you're looking strictly at the zoning definitions.
From a scale standpoint, one of the things I think is interesting is that you're distanced from that south facade whenever you're looking at it. You're either way down in the creek, in which case I don't think you'll be able to see them, or you're across the way.
A different scale. I think the other mitigating thing is the fact that it's set back pretty significantly.
They're half a block away.
Brittany, are you able to pull up the applicant packet?
Yes, I can. Give me a second.
Okay, I'm looking at sections on page 36. I think I may have found something that may help. Essentially, what Fred was talking about, what was giving me some pause.
One moment.
And it also goes back to, I always plead with applicants, please show me a section of the site. 36.
The one that's numbered 36, or is it
It's the one that's numbered 36.
36 in the packet.
It is showing the north-south section 03 and 04.
Well, you're on the original one there, not the current one.
Oh, yeah, it's probably the same information because what I'm looking at is I'm zooming in on the balconies. Yeah, the balconies aren't showing up, so I'm on the old one.
Okay, north-south section 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So here's the update.
Yep. But what I'm getting at is once Brittany shows it or pulls it up, or if everybody has it, those balconies that were giving me pause are recessed back pretty far. Plus, if you're down in the creek, you're not going to perceive them because the mass of floors 1 through 4 hide it.
Yeah.
Now, across the creek, you're going to be able to see the length of them. But I think when you're starting across the creek, that starts to
Set within the whole elevation at that point, rather
it starts to disappear more. And the concern is for me, from a historic standpoint, is when you're up close, you would notice it. But again, the creek is helping us because I think you're down low enough. You're not even going to see it because they cut off the building. From across the creek, you'll see it, but I don't think that perception of that length is as noticeable.
Say those combined with the fact that it is from a strict zoning interpretation could be interpreted as not the primary facade.
There's that too.
I think what we're all struggling with is, I'll speak for myself, is what I'm struggling with is I don't think that the projecting balconies or the treatment of the balconies in general is necessarily out of character. And I think with what you were just saying, Andy, combined with this being a secondary facade, allows me to endorse the balconies as being okay in this instance.
From a zoning perspective, this is probably a side interior. This is no right of way.
It looks like that setback's in the order of 20 feet too, even to the face of balcony. I don't think the same can be said for the lower one within the brick mass above the parking entry.
Yeah, that's the only one that's The only one that, the reason why that one doesn't give me as much pause, let's see if I can find the elevation again, is because it seems to follow, it's a little bit smaller, but it seems to follow the rhythm that we had. I think we had a discussion about this the last time, where the corner piece that's all glass kind of matches this piece that's set. But then it's kind of its own thing because it feels like it's trying to be part of the middle piece. So that one, I understand why the balconies are on that side because you have a better view. Like I could see staff's point of view. It's like, can we just move to the north and then it just goes away? But then you're overlooking a parking lot.
The existing as presented on those doesn't feel right to me. There may be a couple of different solutions to that, it sounds like. John's presented one, you presented, staff has presented another. It's, you know, it could go a couple of different ways.
From a dimensional standpoint, the depth is in keeping with the other balconies that are recessed that we're not taking issue with. The width fits into more or less the module or the rhythm of the articulation. From a consistency standpoint, this might be unpopular, but I'm struggling to find a way to take exception to these three. But I also at the same time agree that they feel cavernous, and maybe it's the fact that they're combined with a large void below that it starts to just overly erode that corner. But is it out of context of the building? Is it out of context for other areas that we're looking at? That's what I struggle with. I'm not sure that's the case.
I think the difference is that these are on a primary street wall. Good point. On a lower level. The others are all set back or on a secondary higher up. These are right there at the street wall, quite low.
That's an excellent point. That absolutely agree with that.
I don't think we should redesign it for them, but I'm inclined to say that they need to restudy these or redo these. And, you know, to my mind, John's presented an interesting opportunity of, you know, does it become kind of a sunroom? Does it become, that's an interesting path.
It does look like it, you know, depending on the unit planning, it could go to the north, although the integration with the street's not as possible. It could be that the structural grid passes through it and breaks it up. Maybe that was, I don't know.
What did the striping wind up with over there? Because I'm not familiar with that. I don't know what they did. What Dottie did when they restriped the street. And would that have any impact on what we're doing? I doubt it.
I don't think so. I think the street wall is still the street wall.
Yeah, okay.
And I can understand why moving them to the north would be attractive because you are then on the parking lot facing other balconies. It's, you know.
I also want to just throw out there, not that I think this parking lot is going to ever go away because it's so integral to the building that it serves. But in theory, it could.
Oh, it's buildable?
It is buildable.
Okay. Which we talked about the last time we saw this, and we had conversations about those window bays on that.
Well, we need to remember too, right, that are those windows fire rated on there? Yeah, they're fire rated. So the balcony condition would be a challenging one on the north side because it's against that property line. I forgot about that.
Well, it seems like to, in a way, summarize that the largest issue we're taking with these is the proximity to the primary facade and the pedestrian realm. And they're that's the trouble with that articulation. So perhaps there is a, you know, I don't know if it's a conditional condition or if it's a friendly, but we asked them to restudy that so it's more in keeping with the rest of the articulation at that spot.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, to kind of summarize on the balconies, I think that we're all generally in agreement that the projecting balconies on the glass corner facing west are acceptable. The added recessed balconies on the south and the lower section of the building are acceptable. The larger projecting balconies on the south are acceptable because they are recessed back so far from the lower mass. They're in that secondary mass, it's pushed back, they're recessed, and they're less visible. And so, and then nobody's really had any objections or concerns about the north facing balconies that are kind of in that alley gasket zone. So really it's the ones that are facing the east. I think we're all kind of in agreement that the lower ones in that lower 55 feet, two levels 2 through 4 need to be revised. And I think that we would need to make that a condition. What that is, I think we need to define. And so then it's the question of, do we feel that the ones from level 5 and above facing east would fall under that same recessed back, less visible that we have for the south, or if those also need to be revised to meet the preferences and the guidelines.
Sorry, you're talking about the upper story ones
Correct.
on the east. I personally don't have an issue with that. I think they're the same they have the same degree of setback. All the arguments for the south, I think, still probably apply to those, but I'd agree about the condition for the ones within the masonry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's wording that. I mean, I'm looking at the suggested motion, and I think there were 3 conditions proposed by staff. One was that the sliding doors and windows be revised to in-swing or casement doors and windows. And I think I heard a fair bit of push to say, yeah, actually, actually that needs to stay in. The second was correcting the east elevation, show the new windows. That's I think pretty straightforward. And then the third was related to the size of the balconies. And I think what I'm hearing is that we want to revise that last condition, I think, to only apply to the
East elevation
levels 2 through 4.
And I personally think it may be, just for the discussion to help clarify, I don't know that that's necessarily a reduction of the balcony size that's the issue. It's the articulation of it within the mass and the fact that, so it may be that the same size still works, it just needs to be articulated differently. But it may also be that, so I just want to have that pathway open maybe.
Conditions are supposed to be very specific
yeah.
and actionable items that Jesse can say, yes, you did
This
what the
meets
commission.
this, or no, it does not.
Can we
So restudy is not a
Correct.
very useful one.
Can we approve everything except that in a way? Can we say, can we issue an approval and that the condition is that
I mean,
those have to be represented to
you
the,
could say based on discussion that you don't need to re-discuss all the other items. But I don't know if there's a way you can approve the project with a very vague
condition.
Yeah.
yeah, I can
Yeah,
see
and
that
I-
condition.
I would be concerned with, I would, to kind of go along with that, to say, approve it with a condition of these 3 balconies need to return, because as the design team and the applicant work through that, the changes that they might propose to solve the question of these 3 balconies may create other changes across the building that would then need to be reviewed. So
it sounds to me like we're headed to a denial with the friendly advice of those 3 pieces that were highlighted.
yeah, I mean, unless we can agree with on a specific condition to address those 3 balconies, I think from my perspective, it seems like, it's likely a denial, but that the testimony will track that we're in agreement with staff about the use of the slider doors. We're in agreement about reflecting that added window in the elevation, and that we find the other balconies to be acceptable as presented, except for those three.
That's the concern that I want to make sure that it's captured. So if they come back, someone decides to make, like for instance, Tom leaves and someone else joins the spot. They have heartburn with something that we already find approval for. I want to make sure that the client has got some
Actionable
standing, that the only thing that they have to look at through this whole packet is the 3 elevations on 2, 4, and 5 on the east elevation. 2, 3, and 4, sorry.
Could we do a condition then that just says east elevation balconies 2 through 4 need to comply with the recommendations? And
No, because that's still approvals with conditions don't come back to the commission. They only go to staff, and that is, as Heather said, very vague and not something
that's
Jesse
still too
can
vague.
I appreciate the vote of confidence.
I think if we make the condition, it has to be very specific.
Yeah.
I am not concerned with a denial and the record clearly showing that you're comfortable with the items, and new commissioners coming on. The majority of you are here today. I do know Tom's time is ending very shortly, and hopefully we will have a new commissioner very shortly. But I think we've done that in the past where we have denied projects with indicating that we're comfortable with the majority of the project. We're just denying it for one component.
That's what I was wondering.
And staff usually covers that staff report, so since the last time it was here.
We did that on this specific project back in October.
Yeah.
And it was for the windows on the lower north level of the east,
yeah,
like the northeast corner of the building. And those came back to you guys and were approved in November because they restudied them based on your deliberation.
So yeah, I'm wondering if the denial is just to say restudy of those balconies on the east elevation, and then any kind of new staff report would be like, hey, you guys looked at this on March 7th. This was all in agreement. This is the only thing you're looking at.
Yeah, unless there are other changes that necessitate review.
Yeah, we would strongly recommend the designer makes no additional changes.
Adam has a comment.
Adam Hernandez, Assistant City Attorney. You can't make a condition that says this board basically has to approve everything we talked about. And I'm totally paraphrasing here, but if you deny, the project comes back as a new project, and there can be changes made to that project based on the discussion, but there could also be changes just that the design team wants to make. So you would have to review that project in total. What you may also want to consider here is if you feel the majority of this project is meeting guidelines, but one portion is not, that you could continue this project so that they could address that specific item, bring that back to the commission, and then have another look at it. That's another.
Do we need to specify a date for the continuance, or can we just leave that open?
It's gonna be a date certain.
You should specify a date, but if it's not ready, you could push it out another date if need be.
I think that probably
That feels more aligned with where we're headed.
That feels clear. I do think we should check with the applicant and make sure they're comfortable with the continuance.
Does that make sense?
It does. I think we're planning we would study this immediately and in all likelihood try to get on the docket for April, as unrealistic as that might seem. We're quick and capable.
So just so you know, the filing deadline for that is this Tuesday at noon.
Coming Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah.
It would be, listen, this is a project that is constrained by time in terms of approval at the SDP level, and this commission's approval is a requisite of getting that approval. And so we need to get back in for SDP and have that approved by September for a lot of other reasons. And we're intending to start construction for a lot of other reasons by the end of the year. And so time is of the essence. This will take 100% of our team's focus. So I would suggest, I think I'm personally ready to commit to us being on the next docket.
set a date certain for the April meeting. April 4th.
It's a week, right? So,
Sorry,
no, today's Thursday.
yeah. April 4th is
Yeah.
the next meeting.
Can the turnaround,
Their filing deadline is Tuesday. If they could submit by Tuesday at noon, we can
Just-
put them on that agenda.
let me just ask you a question though, because the filing is for a new application where it's continued. Does it have to adhere to that same filing deadline? Can they?
Yes, we still need a complete application. That's what Adam is saying. If it's not ready, he would continue it to another date.
So yes, on the continuance I'm getting from client. Can we, I guess the question is, would we be able to push that date? And if we can beat it by Tuesday of next week, can we push it to the following?
We can't have a special meeting if that's what you're
No.
requesting.
Can we push it to the following month's meeting?
Could we do a date certain of the May,
That's right.
on or before the May
That's where I'm getting.
meeting? So if they were able to get it in early, we could review it in April, but otherwise our date certain is May.
Or should we do date certain for April? And
If
if
we
they
don't
don't
get
make it at the
just-
April
Then we
meeting,
just
we'll just continue it.
That's
Yeah.
how we handle it.
Oh, is it? That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. We're gonna
Okay.
do that. I'll be shocked that we don't do that.
Okay, and I also just want to share, we do have agenda items already on April 4th. So everyone knows we will set the agenda on Thursday after the filing deadline, and we will follow up because we may have to have the overflow meeting, just so everyone knows.
Well, if we are all generally in agreement, would somebody care to motion?
Did you figure it out for you?
I move to continue application 2020 COA-023 to the April 4th meeting, the Lower Downtown Design Review Commission.
I'll clarify that it's April 4th, 2024.
Accepted.
Thank you.
Well, first we have to have a
Do
second.
we have a second?
Second on the
Right.
motion.
Craig seconds the motion. I add a clarification that it is April 4th, 2024.
I accept that. Second.
All right, so with that, the clarification has been accepted and seconded, and I will take a vote of the commission. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any nays? Motion to continue is unanimous. Right. Moving on, thank you. Moving on our agenda, we don't have any business items, but we do have a discussion item today.
I'm
Jen?
gonna put up the screen for you to read the process.
Okay, so moving into discussion item, I will announce our discussion item that's on our agenda today. Staff, Jen, will introduce the item, informational item or item for discussion. Commission will discuss with staff and commission ourselves, and no actions or votes will be taken. So today's discussion item is the 2023 Landmark Year in Review.
I'm getting the screen so that Brittany's trying to get my video up.
If you turned off her video earlier, you have to like re-give her permission. Makes sense.
I mean, I did that. It's
Oh,
not
really?
working.
Huh. And you're hitting the thing over there and it's not popping up?
Right. It's popping up, but the video's not.
That's definitely not it. Apologies.
I mean, the great thing is there are 0 attendees. So, so actually, since there's 0 attendees, shall I just talk to the people in the room?
I think you can see even.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry about that.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm Jen Capetto. I manage the landmark team for the city, and it's nice to see you all. It's been a while. I am sharing about the year in review for last year. I did this for LPC and LVDRC every year. You guys just didn't have a meeting last month, so here we go. We usually do it in February, but we'll do it in March. So last year was a busy one, no surprise. We ended last year with 5 additional individual landmarks and 1 additional historic district. So that would be former church on 38th Avenue in the, I believe, Cole neighborhood or Whittier neighborhood. It's and Cole. It's Cole. Thank you. I thought it was Cole, but I started second guessing myself. So 1618 East 38th. The Bill Muchow house, that was his personal house that he designed for himself at 618 South Monroe Way. The Alan Gass house, which he also designed for himself and lives in, is 602 South Harrison Lane, and then 1741 Gaylord Street, which was an owner opposed designation that was passed by City Council. Plus the Irving Andrews house. He was a prominent civil rights attorney, Black civil rights attorney in Denver, and this was his house and his office on 2241 to 43 York Street. Our historic district was the La Raza Park Historic Cultural District, and that came out of the Latino Chicano Historic Context Project, Nuestra Historias, that we worked on a couple of years ago. Some of the planning and regulatory projects that we worked on include the American Indian and Indigenous Peoples Historic Context. So that has been a really big, intensive project that the team has worked on. In the really kicking off last year, we had a community kickoff in February, as well as attending the Denver March powwow in March. And we invited several members of the Native American and Indigenous communities to come to Denver. We invited them from the surrounding states for a tribal collaborative weekend. So these community members, tribal representatives, are representing tribes who this was their ancestral homelands. And it was a fantastic weekend of collaboration and discussion with our team, but also other city groups and the tribal members here and from other places. We're also working on the design guideline update for the general design guidelines, not the LODO yet, but the general design guidelines. We're doing phase 2 of that right now. Phase 5 of Discover Denver, which is the citywide historic building survey. Phase 5 is, Northeast Denver. So Skyland, Clayton, Whittier, 5 points. And West Denver, so Val Verde, Villa Park, Barnum, and Barnum West. We're in the process of doing the Northeast Denver. We're almost done with it in a couple months, and then we'll move on to West Denver. So that's part of this year's work too. We worked with the planners on the southeast plan, which was completed, and then the near northwest plan was completed in January. So we're going to count it for last year, even though because the bulk of the work was last year. And then we've been doing a lot of work on inclusivity and designations, trying to research those properties of the existing designations to make sure that we're telling the full story of those. And finally, the Spear Cherry Creek study that Abby has talked to you all about. So for design review, that's the stuff that you all look at mostly. We had 268 quick reviews, a little over 1,000 administrative reviews, just over 200 commission reviews for just over 1,500 total applications. That is down from previous years. We will chalk that up to people, interest rates being higher, people doing less work on their houses, smaller projects on their houses. But the commission reviews is pretty comparable. So we were down a bit, but it wasn't too bad. And the quicks were up, which is good. We like to get things out the door faster. So the commission, the Landmark Preservation Commission, reviewed 200 of those. And actually, some of these are like duplicate things. So you guys didn't review 2 projects, I promise. So that these numbers are a little off when you do the total, because you like setting a public hearing is an item that we count, but it's not actually an action, or it's not really a review of a project yet. So we kind of funny numbers there. They had 26 meetings. Kelly Wemple stepped down. She was at the end of her term, and Nick Fusianis joined the commission. And now here's you all. So you had 29 projects that you reviewed. You had 10 meetings. Jane and Mike stepped down at the end of their terms, and Amy and Craig joined. So welcome to that. We also reviewed demolition citywide. We have a certificate of demolition eligibility program, but also demolition. And so we're looking to see if properties have potential to be individual landmarks or not. Most of them don't. We had 5 proposed demolitions in historic districts. They were almost all, I think they were all non-contributing buildings, so not too big of a deal. We had 56 certificate applications and 341 demo applications. Again, very down. That is definitely due to interest rates. So if you were to map interest rates, the inverse would be true. You would see that the interest rates are high and they were much lower 2 years ago. So we anticipate this number will go up this year. But as you can see, we approved 387 of these within 10 business days. We only found that 9 properties had potential to be individual landmarks. It's a small number. It is 2.3%, which is faded out on the screen, sorry. It's comparable to previous years, but a little low. We also review tax credits. Those go to the Landmark Preservation Commission. And there were just over $80,000 in tax credits that were certified for last year, which is just under $400,000 worth of work that went into historic rehab projects. And that money went to the contractors and the architects to help pay for it. It went to the owners who helped, you know, it trickles down to the people who are doing the work and the suppliers and all that. So it's great incentive for the economy. It was down last year, but we had a really weird high year in 2022. And I think it's largely because so many people were doing work during the pandemic that they finished their projects in 2022. So last year was pretty comparable to non-2022 years. We got a bunch of grants last year. So I want to highlight a few of those. For the Context Project, we received an underrepresented communities grant from the National Park Service. We also received a grant from the National Trust and from the Rose Community Foundation. And then we put some money in for ourselves as well as Denver Mountain Parks, which we're grateful for their support. We've been doing our own work on the existing designation inclusivity project, but then Discover Denver got a grant from the State Historical Fund, which is a huge supporter of that project, which is great. We did a lot of community engagement last year, especially through the American Indian and Indigenous Peoples communities. So Powwow, Eduporium, IACON, and Friendship Powwow, as well as the Collaborative Weekend I mentioned. We also have presented and staff have presented at the Colorado Preservation Conference, the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions webinars, at Docomomo, Colorado, at the Savannah College of Art and Design, and at the University of Colorado, Denver. So we've got a bunch of, we're not just sitting here in our desks, which is great. Wanted to highlight a couple of people who are doing some great things with professional organizations. So Abby was the vice chair, and now she is the chair of the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, which is super exciting to have a Denver representative on their board, but also chairing. Crystal is a member of the Public Art Committee, and I'm a member of the Rocky Mountain Chapter Association for Preservation Technology board, but the first two are the more important ones. Administrative projects. We also are trying to make things simpler and clean things up around here. So we have a design review application checklist that was launched last fall. Brittany worked tirelessly on it, which is fantastic, and it's working very well. So thank you for that work. Jessie then has been working on the neglected and derelict buildings application checklist. She tells me it's not done, but we're beta testing it. So we're good. It's very close. And then we also expanded what qualifies for a quick review, which is probably why those numbers went up towards the end of last year. We did a lot of hiring and training. And we developed a welcome to your historic property. Congratulations on your recent purchase of a historic property postcard and a tax credit postcard so that we can mail those out to property owners to let them know about some of the incentives and some of the work they have to do. So because of budget cuts, we haven't done it yet this year, but those postcards are ready, and hopefully in the second half of the year we'll be able to allocate money towards that. We're working on a designation customer guide that is with graphic design and should be done momentarily. And that is so that people know more about how to write designation applications. And we have been digging through our old files that we don't need to keep anymore, and we are sending those over to the Western History Collection. So that's been a multi-year project. Hiring, as I said, we did a lot of hiring last year. I was really busy with that. So we've promoted Abby and Brittany into principal planner positions, which is fantastic. And then we took their positions and repurposed those a little. We were able to hire Matt Buda into the associate position. He was formerly our inspector. So we hired Lauren Gleason as our new inspector last year to replace Matt with his promotion. And then the two senior planner positions that Abby and Brittany vacated, we kind of reclassified those into staff planner. And so Andrew Abby has joined us as our staff planner. We also were able to hire Kathy Corbett as a part-time senior planner on call. And she formerly was a consultant, and now she's on our team, but in a part-time capacity. And then Kira Trundle is our American Indian Indigenous Peoples Context intern, which is awesome. She's doing a great job. So what's on tap for this year? I think I mentioned to you all that we had an org structure shift not last year, 2 years ago, where we divided the teams into the single team into a planning and regulatory group, as well as a design review group. And now we have two supervisors to supervise both teams. So Kara Hahn is supervising the planning and regulatory group, which happened in 2022, at the end of 2022. And then we hired Amy Amazon, who I don't know, you all have met. Amy's right over there.
Hi, nice to meet you. I do know Craig from having worked together. I have arrived here, I think 6 weeks ago. I was with City of Aspen for 30 years. Most of that as Historic Preservation Officer and then as Planning Director. And I'm so glad to be here with you, and I'm really enjoying all the great work that you have done to this beautiful city.
Yeah, so Amy is supervising. So this is kind of the finalization of organizational structure and shifting people around for promotional opportunities and all that. So that's great. We're also continuing the American Indian Indigenous Peoples context. That will finish up in 2025. Long project. We're deep in phase 2 of the design guideline update, and we have some interesting designations on deck. And we're trying to expand outreach and engagement efforts with whatever budget we can use. So I think that is it. Yep, there we go. That's it. Yep, you can end the slideshow. So anyway, just wanted to share all the exciting things we did last year, but also the exciting things we're doing this year.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, never a dull day.
It's great to get such a detailed, comprehensive update.
Yeah, sorry. It's
No, it's great, but it's nice. I mean, it's frankly not something that we can see at planning board with groups that we interact with. We don't get nearly that kind of detail. Appreciate it.
Sure. I feel like people think we just sit behind our desks and do drawings all day, and there's a lot of stuff that we do.
No, we just think you sit behind your desk and refuse things.
Oh,
I tried.
Those things.
We don't. We say, yes, sure, or no, but have you thought about that? It's never a no.
Thank you. There's nothing else on our discussion items, so I will adjourn the meeting today at 10:14. Sounds like we will see